What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk or subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they watched a very interesting weekend of football, but they continued their offensive coordinator search in the meantime and are set to head to Mobile, Alabama for this year's Senior Bowl, where there will be plenty of news, plenty of action, plenty of quarterback talk when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to dive into some big news over the weekend, a new offensive coordinator candidate, how the Detroit Lions may have hurt the Steelers' OC search, and some big-name quarterbacks who have been associated with the Pittsburgh Steelers and or have been told they're coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a little chilly, but it's a nice day. It was a beautiful weekend here in the Burgh. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm crushed. We're going to go in on the Detroit Lions, and I hope that we got to take it easy on them, because I think God hates the Detroit Lions, and I don't want to kick them while they're down. That was, I'm not. I was pulling for the Lions, but I'm not a Lions fan, not a Lions fan or anything. But I think that was the most emotional I've gotten watching a team that I have never rooted for in my life lose a game. That was brutal. So I'm taking it easy on the Lions today.
It definitely hurt. It was at every moment you try to talk yourself into it. You know, you're like, all right. And then you just, once it tied, it was like, okay, that was it. This was fun. This was a blast. We had a really good time thinking about it. It was over. I won't lie to you. I was Googling Dan Campbell. I had a shirt in my Etsy cart that was a soup can of Dan Campbell, and it said it was Campbell's Bite Your Knee Off soup. And I went, man, I'm buying this one for the Super Bowl. Almost bought it at halftime. Very thankful I did not. It was a tough time. And I'm not upset that the 49ers made it in. I'm not. I think I'm more upset that the Kansas City Chiefs found their way into the Super Bowl. But just what that team kind of meant to the world at that time, it was a tough one. So we do take it easy on them. They might have screwed the Pittsburgh Steelers when it comes to their offensive coordinator search. We're going to dive into that. Before we do start our list of topics here, I want to let you guys know that tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the afternoon, not sure an exact time because practices are an hour behind and we will have to work around interview schedules and that kind of stuff. But our pal Nick Martin is down in Mobile, Alabama at this year's Senior Bowl. Me and him will be going live, boots on the ground down there to get all the insight and his takeaways on practice, what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing down there, and any news that we think we should bring to you guys. That will be live on our YouTube channel Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoon. We'll try to keep you guys somewhat updated on a time, but make sure to set the alarms or the alerts to make sure you're keeping up with that one. When it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we're going to start with their offensive coordinator candidacy, their interviews. They brought in another big name this time, former Atlanta Falcons head coach Arthur Smith comes in for an interview, probably the biggest name to interview with the Pittsburgh Steelers, according to the Athletic's Diana Rossini. There are 7 teams that have been interested in Arthur Smith throughout this entire process. There was only 8 open OC candidates or jobs heading into the field. Chances were the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to be one of them. They were one of them. They conducted it yesterday. You got the news. I think, social media-wise at least, fans were not happy that Arthur Smith was part of this OC search. Did you feel the same way? What were your thoughts when the news did break?
Yeah, I don't really know why anyone would have, an optimistic outlook on this. I mean, it's just you use the phrase "big name," and I think you're right. He is a big name, but for all the wrong reasons. Arthur Smith, I don't think excites anyone. I don't think his track record makes you believe that he is the right fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or really any offense. Quite honestly, any offense with young potential, big time playmakers, anything like that. I think his track record with the Falcons is not encouraging, to say the least.
Terrible.
And I think there's some parallels to the Steelers, quite honestly, that really make you question things. Like, they have an explosive running back. They have a great tight end that's being underutilized. They have a great top wide receiver that's being underutilized and is real young. Just all of this young talent between Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson went underutilized, and that's under the direction of an offensive-minded head coach in Arthur Smith. What about that makes you think that under his leadership, George Pickens and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren and Pat Freiermuth would flourish in any of the same ways?
Yep.
I think that's my biggest thing. It's like he got fired for underutilizing young talent, and you're going to bring him into another situation where there's young talent that is being underutilized. I don't know. And then he oversaw kind of the development to this point of Desmond Ridder, a veteran quarterback who left college after 4 years and was productive, but kind of came on strong later in his career and really made a name for himself in draft circles at the end of his senior year. Who does that sound like, man? Like, who does that sound like? That's Kenny Pickett, man. And he wasn't able to kind of get Desmond Ridder to a good enough spot. And so I don't think there's a quarterback development track record that makes you any more confident. I don't really get this at all. Like you said, Arthur Smith has a ton of interest from around the league, and I'm not really sure I understand why. Obviously, I'm not in these interviews or anything, but it just really doesn't make any sense to me.
Cat wants to say hi. He has very strong opinions on Arthur Smith, as many Steelers fans do. I got to agree. I look at Arthur Smith, and people try to kind of take you back. I had some conversations yesterday with some people who were like, oh, yeah, but his time in Tennessee, he made life very easy for Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, the Derrick Henry success. And I was like, yeah, like I get that. He did have some moments. Where is your ceiling? That's where I think this goes. How high are you trying to shoot here? If you're trying to shoot for made life easy for the quarterback, but that quarterback got benched as soon as he left, that's not really shooting for the stars. Derrick Henry, I get it, totally different style of running game, zone offense, which again, I think the Steelers should be a zone run team. You want to bring in a Kyle Shanahan type player, that's zone run all day long. Still, it's Derrick Henry, and somehow that went away as soon as Robinson was brought into Atlanta. I don't know, how good Desmond Ridder really is. I'm concerned that he just isn't good enough to play in the NFL and be a starting quarterback in the NFL in general. But I don't know if Kenny Pickett is either. And I think to have somebody who couldn't do it once, why would you want to try and do it again? This is the first interview where you're spot on. Like, I don't get where all the interest is coming from. It's the first time where, like, you could be worried about a Gerard Johnson and say, he doesn't have the experience. Or you could be worried about a Thomas Brown and say, well, his first year in Carolina was rough. Those guys, at least, like, there's so much potential. There's so much untapped potential that you could reach if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers or whoever hires them. Arthur Smith, you kind of know what you're getting. He's the first guy where you're like, all right, I understand who this guy is, what he brings to a coaching role, and what he's capable of doing. Cool. It's not that exciting.
Yeah, and you're not excited by that resume at all. I think that's exactly the point. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're looking at this and going, there's so many other candidates that, bring you to another level. And even if they don't work out, like they might not work out, but you're willing to take that risk over settling. This is the first time where it kind of feels like things are settling for the Pittsburgh Steelers. My worry is he's the first name that I think I've heard of in this entire search where I go, I wouldn't be surprised if the Pittsburgh Steelers hired this guy. This would be the first one where I said, yeah, that one could happen. That could happen. And it would stink. And I think what makes it worse is, and we were going to talk, yesterday we were going through podcast topics, and it was halftime of the Lions game. We're sitting around, and I added right to the end of the list, if the Lions win, how quickly can the Steelers interview Kubiak? Now they got to wait another 2 weeks to interview Kubiak because the Lions decided that they weren't playing football in the second half, or as you say, God hated the Lions, which I think you're spot on there. How much trouble, are you willing to wait 2 weeks to interview another guy if you have your plan B already spoken to and interviewed in Arthur Smith? Do you think this is becoming a little bit troublesome for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, I think it is. It's obviously, Kubiak is probably candidate A, like you said, plan A. And the thing is, he's going to get interest from a ton of other teams. Like, his recruitment to an offensive coordinator job is going to go fast and furious. I'm sure of it.
Yes.
And Smith feels like, I don't know. Honestly, the best case scenario is that he's like a safe option that they know, like a safety school in terms of offensive coordinators. Like he
Yep.
is the one that they can fall back on. They know that he'll be available because, I mean, why would another team hire him? I guess the fact that he's garnering interest too, kind of speaks to the fact that that might not be possible. But like,
Yeah, I think that pushes the envelope a little bit. Like, I think the fact that he has interviews in other places and there are other teams that are going to be like, oh, well, I'm interested too, maybe makes the Steelers not wait 2 weeks. You know,
yeah,
like not wait for, if they're worried they're going to lose Arthur Smith and they're not sure they're going to get Kubiak, you know, do they just jump the gun here? How dangerous? And that's like, you know, we just sat around saying, don't hire this guy. 90% of the fan base feels the same way. I think they're entering dangerous waters here.
oh, absolutely. And I mean, there's a bunch of guys in between. I mean, maybe not a bunch anymore with the way Cliff Kingsbury's fallen off the table. Zach Robinson's off the table
Where
now.
did Cliff Kingsbury go?
Well, I thought he wasn't really being.
Oh,
well, there was
yeah,
at least a report.
yeah. Dulac says he's not on the. Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, yeah, I guess we don't know 100% for sure, but I kind of trust that report, and I think that's the latest thing to come out. So, but yeah, I mean, Zach Robinson is with the Falcons now, I believe. He got hired as their offensive coordinator over the weekend. Like, this early list of candidates that we saw, this early list of young, and kind of, we can call them innovative, I guess, like this young, fresh crop of offensive coordinators the Steelers were considering, are kind of dropping off the board a little bit. Like there's not as wide a net right now. And this is just, I think Arthur Smith is kind of a reaction to that. Quite honestly, it is okay. Well, we took our swings a little bit. Like we have these candidates that we think that really excite us, and we got to have a backup plan. We got to have a safety net. We got to have, one of these experienced guys that we can fall back on. And it's just, as you said, right now, it's dangerous waters where Arthur Smith is now one of, I guess, 3 guys that they've talked to who are still on the board between Panthers OC. I can't remember his name. Thomas Brown, and there's one more, Gerard Johnson. We just talked about him. So, they're left with fewer guys on the board and fewer guys who really, I think, get you excited and I think take the team in a different direction.
Yes, I agree. And it's, look at, I really hope that they're waiting, and I really hope that they will not, like, I hope that a guy like, and I don't hope this because I hope everybody gets jobs, and, you know, I don't want anybody left off the table or having to settle or whatever. If a guy like Thomas Brown is still sitting there in 2 weeks, you know, and everybody else is gone, at least you do have like a good fallback option. Whereas and I would take that scenario over Arthur Smith being well, we're going to hire this guy because, you know, because we think he works. Like, I don't think the fans are going to be excited. I don't think it moves the needle at all. I think it's the first time where, you know, we talked all week last week about, and we even ended the show on Friday talking about, where are they now? They're in a really good spot. This is a very optimistic search. It took one guy to be like, okay, this is troublesome. We're worried now. You should be worried too that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to settle. Who's coming next? Byron Leftwich is you know, I don't know. Everybody keeps coming up with different names for Matt Canada, like Pat Mexico or whoever. You know, is that who's coming next? Like, it's just it's worrisome. It's the first time where you're starting to have some hesitation, and that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers are. We'll see what happens, but I would keep your eyes glued to the news because, man, dude, I don't feel great once that name was brought up. They will head to Mobile. I do expect many more interviews to come and much more news to come while they're down in Mobile. They're going to get opportunities to talk to some young guys who are coaching with these guys, some up and comers. I think that's where you'll start to generate some more news there. But to knock that one out right in time for Mobile, concerning. Definitely concerning. Guys, we have gear, new merchandise from AST to Muth, Bleed Black and Gold, Kenny to George, and plenty of others now at our new website, blackandgoldapparel.com. And the coolest part, 50% of all profits at our store go to UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh to make sure that we are giving back. We can't thank you guys enough, and we want to show you guys how thankful and how grateful we are for everything by making sure that we do our part to make the community here in Pittsburgh better. Go check out everything. We tried to make everything new and improved, from our designs to our quality of sweatshirts and t-shirts. and everything else. Let us know and check everything out at blackandgoldapparel.com. And as always, thank you guys for everything. All right, let's move it on here. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been named the best fit for Oregon quarterback, potential first rounder, expected first round pick, Bo Nix, by the 33rd team's Marcus Mosher. He says, quote, "What does Mike Tomlin value the most in a quarterback? The ability to play the position without turning the ball over at a high rate. The Pittsburgh Steelers went 6-1 when they didn't turn the ball over this year, but were 4-6 when they did. Even in games where Pittsburgh had just one offensive turnover, it went 2-3. That is probably the wrong offensive philosophy in 2024, but that's how Tomlin coaches. So, which quarterback can make enough plays without turning the ball over at a high rate? That is none other than Bo Nix, who threw just 3 interceptions during the entire 2023 season. In fact, Nix had just 26 interceptions in his career on 1,936 pass attempts. That means he tossed an interception on just 1.34% of his throws. That's pretty wild, even for a college quarterback. That is pretty wild. That is a pretty crazy number. I hope that Mike Tomlin's philosophy is not, hey, just don't turn the ball over. We've been talking about that for 2 years now, and I think that that's worrisome. You read that. We talked about it a little bit. What are your thoughts on Bo Nix? Do you think he's the right fit, and what was your reaction to Mosher's reasoning?
Well, I think Bo Nix is a player that could probably fit on a lot of different teams. Like whether or not the Steelers are truly the best fit for him, I don't really know. Like I think just the way he played, and for kind of this reason, like he's smart, he's older, he's probably more pro ready than a lot of the guys in the draft right now. That makes him a good fit for a lot of teams. That includes the Steelers, but I don't really understand the logic, to be quite honestly. The reasoning behind why he would be the best fit for the Steelers or something like that. Because I think they already have a guy who doesn't really turn the ball over on the roster. I mean, Kenny Pickett does that. And I don't think their problem was turning the ball over, quite honestly, on offense. I think it was the lack of aggressiveness. It was the lack of explosive plays. It was the lack of, I think, big-time playmaking at the quarterback position. And unless Bo Nix gives that to you, I don't think he's really worth spending a first-round pick, certainly. Maybe not even a draft pick at all. And I think if the Steelers are going to look for a quarterback in this draft, they should be looking for someone who's got a little bit more of a higher ceiling, a little bit more of a risk or a project, maybe you could put it that way. But someone who just gives you a little bit of a higher ceiling, someone who can elevate you, not someone who can just kind of keep you at the same floor because, like I said, it's the same floor. They're already there.
Yep. I agree. You look at follow the trends. That's all you have to do is follow the trends. When there are a lot of media members asking, and look at, don't get me wrong, a lot of media members ask nonsense questions, myself included at times, and you follow that nonsense question as far as you could get it. I get it. But sometimes you catch on to a trend and you're like, why are you asking so much about not turning the ball over? Why are you asking so much about, are you told to play it safe? That is because it is very recognizable that a quarterback, Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett were the last two, did not take chances. They sat around and said, how do I not lose my job instead of how do I continue to win it? And that coincides with how do I not lose football games instead of trying to win it? And you find yourself in positions. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs do not lose football games. They go out and they win football games. The 49ers played half of a football game yesterday where they tried not to lose the football game. And then they played the other half of the football game where they tried to win the football game. And you see what happens when you do both of those things. The Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's what Mason Rudolph did. He came in here and tried to win football games. The Steelers don't need that again. They need somebody who's going to come in here and be a gunslinger and force the ball sometimes and make some big plays. And yeah, that's going to come with mistakes and that's going to come with development. And that's why you shoot for the stars with an offensive coordinator, because you try to get somebody who understands this is how you win football games. This guy's going to make mistakes because he's brand new, whether that's Kenny Pickett or whoever. How do I correct this? And they understand how do you correct it while not taking away that flash. Matt Canada had no idea how to not take away the flash. He forced just very minimal splash. He forced, hey, be protective. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want you to lose your job. be protective. That's what he forced the hand of. I felt like Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner knew they had nothing to lose. They turned it around the other way, and once Mason Rudolph went in there, you saw it. And that's what they're looking for right now. That's what they should be looking for right now. I think that goes hand in hand. Bo Nix, I think, is a good quarterback. I got no issues if the Steelers went out and drafted Bo Nix. I agree with you. I think he fits with a lot of teams. I think he's got a lot of upside. I think that if you're drafting Bo Nix in the first round of the NFL draft, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20, there's probably another position or another guy out there that you could fit that position with that's just as good, or maybe a little bit better, and you could go get a different position at that draft pick that I think fits the bill or helps your team immediately just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Do you have a quarterback at 20? Such a tough pick too. Like, you're sitting there at 20, like, who's going to be available? They're saying guys like Jaden Daniels is going to be gone in the top 4 picks. Michael Penix might be a top 10 pick. Like, you're looking at like Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, unless he continues to slide up. Is there even a guy at 20 that you're sitting around going, I think that's a better fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Or are you starting to look at it and say, realistically, maybe you go for a different position because that's your best bet?
Yeah, I don't really think there's a guy at 20 that I think satisfies both like the slot value and
Yes.
and kind of what the Steelers would need at quarterback, if I can put it that way. I think if you are drafting a quarterback, you're looking further down the line. Like, and kind of by the logic that I laid out earlier, like looking for a guy with some better physical tools, like higher upside, that kind of thing. Like, then you're looking at a guy like Joe Milton, maybe in like the 3rd or 4th round or something like that. Like, that's a guy that that's kind of the archetype that I'm like thinking of, is a guy with a big arm, some athleticism. Like, that's the stuff that I'm looking for. And I think you can coach like better decision making, thoughtful aggressiveness, things like that. You can't coach Joe Milton's cannon, man. Like, that guy can chuck the football. So that is the type of guy that I'm looking for if I'm the Steelers. But I'm looking at it later in the draft. I'm not. I completely agree. Pick 20. I think that's got to be reserved for like a guy who could potentially start right away.
Yes. Go get another Joey Porter Jr. Go get another Broderick Jones. Get one of those guys. Don't draft a quarterback because you need it. That's how you ended up with Kenny Pickett. That's how you ended up in the situation that you're in now, because you just drafted a quarterback because you needed a quarterback. You felt like that's where you needed to go. I think it pushes the envelope. Like, you draft a 3rd round quarterback and you use your first 2 picks on very valuable pieces to your team and other positions. You go get a veteran, whether that's Mason Rudolph, whether you think it's going to be Kenny Pickett, whether you go out and sign somebody. You could have a bridge quarterback that's much better than Mitch Trubisky. That is, don't go get another Mitch Trubisky. Go get somebody better than Mitch Trubisky and, try to develop this guy. Try to develop your 3rd round quarterback in the next 2 years to be a starter, which goes back to what I was just saying. You get an offensive coordinator that's capable of doing that. You get somebody who is known to produce all-star quarterbacks, top tier, top of the line QBs. That's where you go. And I think I think a 3rd round quarterback is the best situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers, unless somebody crazy falls. Like Michael Penix falls to pick 20.
Then
draft
I'm
Michael
about
Penix.
It.
Yeah. Like, there's just no need at that point. You draft the best player available. Chances are that's Michael Penix. Jaden Daniels falls to you at 20. Jaden Daniels worries me, but I still think that you consider that very highly. Anybody else, I think I'm just passing on and saying, look, you could get somebody in the 2nd round. You could get somebody in the 3rd round. You could get somebody in the 4th round that, maybe they're not a star, but they got potential to be a star, and we're going to have to develop them into one. Meanwhile, we'll work with what we have. I think that's the way to go about it, which leads us to the next topic of conversation, which was Mason Rudolph, who went on the Ramon Foster show over the weekend or last week and said that he was told by both Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan that they're going to try and get a deal done. He said, quote, "Yeah, it was good. Visited with Mike T and Omar both. And, it was so early, like 3 or 4 days after we played our last game. And there's a lot neither side knows. I felt like they meant it when they said that they'd like to have me back. And I feel like they want to do future business with me. That's good to hear. But like you said, there are so many variables and it's still so early. It's still January. So who knows what'll happen." This is not the first time Mason Rudolph has said something about his future. It is not the first time that the Pittsburgh Steelers have expressed interest in bringing Mason Rudolph back. But every time the answers are kind of the same. Mason Rudolph's a free agent. We understand that he's a free agent, but we want to sign him back. Yeah, Mason's saying, yeah, well, we'll see what happens. We'll see. There's so much that goes into it. We'll see what happens. You're starting to get the feel that Mason wants to go somewhere else and hopes that door opens and sees his way out of Pittsburgh with another opportunity and, is kind of waiting for that chance. Or because at no point, I feel like it would be very easy to say, I would love to come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't get me wrong, maybe it has, but I don't believe that has come out of his mouth just yet.
Yeah, I think Mason would like to come back to the Steelers, but like I think about it as he's a free agent right now. Like everything he says is part of the negotiating tactics. Like it's part of the negotiating deal. His agent is probably telling him to keep things as milquetoast as possible so that they don't give up any leverage at all. Because this is a massive offseason for Mason Rudolph. Like there's no guarantee he's going to play as well as he has over his last 4 games. Like his value might never be higher again in his career. And he's got to maximize this opportunity right now. I think his comments today were kind of maybe not his first acknowledgement of it, but he's acknowledging that the Steelers are in a certain place with their quarterback situation, and he's in a certain place with his career and with his contract situation where he's got to maximize the amount of money that he can get, and that's probably not going to happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not likely. They are not the most likely team to shell out a ton of money for Mason Rudolph because they need a quarterback to come in and help them. It's just not. And so I feel like I feel like the Steelers have kind of acknowledged that, saying, look, we do want him back. We think he's a good player, but we just have to kind of allude to our cap situation and where we're at as a team. And we just might not be able to give Mason as much money as he wants or as other teams might want to give him.
Do you think that the other side of this plays a bit of a role with Mike Tomlin saying that Kenny Pickett resumes QB1 duties, but they're looking for competition? Do you think any part of that in Mason Rudolph's head or his agent's head went, why would I come back to be a number 2, to most likely be viewed as a number 2?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's most likely, to be quite honestly. Like I thought it was going to be a pretty open competition because I think the Kenny is QB1. I think that comment came with a bunch of qualifiers, Yeah. Like I felt like it was a very small part of Tomlin's kind of whole spiel about, look, we need competition for him. This is a huge year for Kenny. Like he's got to basically said he's got to put up or shut up, And that's kind of deal. So, and I think Mason would have to compete in most of the places that he went to, like you think about, so, I think there was going to be competition wherever Mason went. He was going to have to fight for a number 1 job. I think it's just literally, in my mind, it's literally all about who's going to deliver him the biggest paycheck at the end of the day. And that's almost certainly not going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would have to assume.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know. Like the more I think about it, the more I kind of go through teams. Like there are teams that are going to need quarterbacks, and they're going to be willing to pay a little bit for some quarterbacks, but I don't know how much. Like you got to look at a team like the Denver Broncos people have tossed out there. They're going to take on an $86 million cap hit to get rid of Russell Wilson. They're not paying a boatload of money for a quarterback, but maybe Mason fits that mold because they just look at it and go, well, come be our starter. We'll give you $10 million, come be the starter, and that's it. Maybe that's enough for him to say, hey, look, I'll go make $10 million this year. I'll prove with a good offense that I can make 30 next year and go somewhere different, or maybe go to Denver after they ate that cap hit and now they're set to where they need to be. I don't know. Maybe Minnesota finds themselves in a weird situation where they trade Kirk Cousins and they're looking for somebody for the same boat, $10 million. I have a heart of the teams who need a quarterback. There isn't one that strikes me that says we're going to make a bad financial decision in signing our next quarterback. Like there's usually the Cleveland Browns, the Commanders would have been one of them, but I think with the new ownership and the way they're going about things, they're going to overreact the other way. They're not going to pay anybody anything, and they're going to stink, and they're going to be like, look, we're building from the ground up because that's what we're going to do here. There's just not that team that strikes me that says we're going to overpay for a QB, which I think makes the Steelers part of that. But the Steelers are a team that they're going to underpay for a quarterback. They're going to look at it the other way, and they're going to say, yeah, well, everybody's offering you 10 mil. Sorry, Mace. The best we can do is 8. The best that $2 million is really, that's going to be tough. We don't know if you're going to be the starter. I think the best we can do is 8. And they're going to feel like, well, that's good enough. We tried good enough to make that move. So I think that could come into play, but I think it's more the Steelers underpaying than somebody trying to overpay for Mason Rudolph. And at that point, that would not surprise me whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think I agree with that point. Like this is more about what the Steelers kind of want to do with the situation. I think they feel like they have options too. Like,
yes.
Whether it be trade, draft, or Mason, I feel like is really one. Or I mean, there are other free agents as well that are kind of in the same stratosphere. I feel like as Mason in terms of talent, production, how confident they would make you feel, and would probably be cheaper. I mean, I don't know. You never really know until that first quarterback free agent gets signed. But I feel like the Steelers think they have options, so they are not going to lose their minds over making sure Mason Rudolph is back for another year.
Yeah, I look at them and say, well, like I could see them sitting around going, well, Mason's good and he played very well for us, but Jacoby Brissett is probably out there and he's probably a little cheaper. Maybe we should just go with a Jacoby Brissett. Maybe that's what we should do. It's the Arthur Smith of quarterbacks. That's what they're they're going to get into. Yes. They're going to start you. They're going to this is going to be nice, and then they're just going to, all right, well, let's not get carried away here. Okay, we were emotional when we were talking early. Now let's settle into some realistic options here. Arthur Smith, Jacoby Brissett, the Pittsburgh Steelers' new quarterback. So could you imagine how big of a letdown that would be if they walked into the season, into the summer, with Arthur Smith and their competition for Kenny Pickett? And I like Jacoby Brissett, but there are so many better options out there. As Jacoby Brissett, Arthur Smith, QB, OC duo. Could you imagine how big of a letdown that would be to Pittsburgh Steelers fans?
Would be pretty underwhelming. Be pretty underwhelming. I don't even know if there's stuff that you could do in the draft that would make fans even more confident in what you got.
No, that would be as rough as it gets. But I think that's an option out there, and I'm sorry to end the podcast on that note, but in the topic of conversation, it's a very real thought.
You gotta talk to your kids about the Arthur Smith Jacoby Brissett combination. It's possible.
Yeah. You got just prepare for the letdown, and take it from there. With that, wish we could end it on a more positive note, but we're not. It's a good week still. We're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at allsteelers.com and our pit coverage at InsideThePanthers.com. Don't forget, me and Nick Martin will be live tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after Senior Bowl practice sometime in the afternoon. I'd say roughly about 5-6 o'clock, somewhere in that window, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. I know we just ended on a negative note, but make it a positive week. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.